First, Delegate J.B. Akers. J.B., good morning. Thank you for being with us as well.
Fleet intro music that got me fired up to talk to you guys.
Yeah, buddy, Greta Van Fleet. I'm I think Dylan's a big fan of Greta Van Fleet as well. So my older son turned me on to GVF about 10 years ago or so. He was working out, and I said, "Who's that band that sounds like Led Zeppelin?"
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're good.
Going back to my days. Also, Isaiah Taylor, founder of Valar Atomica. Isaiah, did I pronounce that correctly?
Hey, good morning. It's Valar Atomics. It sounds like it's spelled V-A-L-O-R, but it's spelled V-A-L-A-R, just to keep everybody nice and confused. Good morning.
Gotcha. Well, it's great to have you with us. JB, Mike was relating the story to me about how you kind of came about this technology. Can you tell that story first?
Yes, I'll give you guys a quick intro. And for your listeners, I've been on your show just once before. I always appreciate being here. Merry Christmas to everybody.
You too, sir.
It's my favorite time of the year, guys. I love my Christmas time. But so I'm a delegate down in Kanawha County, and I'm always hyper focused on jobs and economic issues. That's just what excites me the most, and I'm always looking for growth opportunities all over West Virginia, and obviously focus on the place where I live. But any place we can add another job, that's just the thing I'm always looking out for. So, we know that one of the things where there's absolutely going to be growth in the near future is in the nuclear space. I think people may have mixed views on this, but I'm a big fan of nuclear. I think it can be done safely. I think it's going to cause exponential growth in the energy sector. And the place where we're going to, I think, see the most growth is in what's called the small modular reactor segment. I don't think we're going to see people building a bunch of these large traditional nuclear powerhouses. I think we're going to see this SMR technology, the small modular reactors, which is where you take, something that's maybe about the size of a shipping container, which provides still a lot of power, and then you create a grid structure with those, and then you hook those reactors up together, and you can produce as much power as you can in terms of the space you have to put these SMRs. So last spring, summer, I was just doing as much research as I could on the SMR space, and I was looking around at startups in that field, and just thinking to myself, is there anybody out there who we can start talking to now? Because while the technology is obviously going to move fast, it's not really being utilized in the U.S. yet because the regulatory framework is just really difficult to jump through, and that's something else that we can maybe talk about later. But now is the time to start forming these relationships with these companies. So one thing led to another. I came across this company I never heard of before in California called Valar Atomics, and I started reading about these guys, and they just have a really fascinating story in many different aspects, not just the fact that they're involved in nuclear, and I don't want to say too much about him because, this is Isaiah's company. He's the CEO. He's all of 25 years old, by the way, if you guys don't know this, so that's another amazing thing about him and the company he runs. But they have a very unique approach to how they want to use their nuclear. If he wants to get more into that, I'll let him do that. I'm not sure how much he wants to say, but it's a great fit for West Virginia in a lot of different ways. So I just cold called these guys. I just reached out to them out of the blue one day, and I said, look, I've read about you guys. I listed some podcasts that Isaiah was on. I did as much personal vetting as I could, and then I reached out to them, and these guys are very open-minded. They're very forward-thinking. Frankly, I didn't expect to get a response back, but, I joke about this, guys. I grew up dating and met my wife, my future wife, in the 90s. So that was back before dating apps. So you actually had to walk up to a girl and risk having her tell you no.
Yep.
So I've never been afraid of being told no. And so, I'm not afraid of making an ask. And I didn't know if I would hear back from these guys or not, but I did pretty quickly. And these guys have just been great to talk to. They're involved in a very, high-tech space, obviously, but when you talk to them, they're just super down to earth. They are America first, which is awesome. You're talking to some very young entrepreneurs, and they absolutely 100% want America to win, which is a great thing. It fits in great with West Virginia as well. And so we talked to him for a while, had some Zoom calls with him, and then went out to meet with them actually in California. They're in Hawthorne, California, which is the El Segundo area, which is also where SpaceX is located. Lockheed Martin has facilities there and some other high-tech industries. And meetings went great. And these guys, this whole area where they're in is also about to turn it over to Isaiah and let him talk. He's the more important part of the equation here. But this area that these guys work in is filled with startup companies being run by these young entrepreneurs who, in contradiction to the Silicon Valley area, which is up further north in California, Silicon Valley is mostly software. These guys in the El Segundo area, they call it the Gundo, they are mostly hardware-based. They're actually wanting to make things, things you can see with your eyes and feel with your hands. It's a hardware-based startup community, and there is just a lot going on there. And Valar is right in the middle of it, and they've had a lot of growth over this past year. A lot of investors are, really big and positive on these guys, and I think when Isaiah talks, you're going to see why. So they then made a visit to West Virginia last week. We had meetings with these guys all day. Literally had them set up with meetings as many people as possible. And, went through the evening, had dinner, and that's where Mike Hornby met with them, was at dinner that evening. He was part of a group of us who sat down and broke bread with these guys. And, Isaiah can speak for himself, but I thought it was a great day. And one of the things, guys, I'll brag for just a second, and I'll let Isaiah talk, is, I'll tell you this, and this is 100% true for your listeners. The state government of West Virginia, we are extremely eager for partnerships and collaboration in this state. And I hope that Isaiah agrees with this, but, we weren't able to get him in front of, every single person we wanted to that day they were here. Some folks were out of state and people travel and not everybody's available, but probably 90% of the folks we needed them to meet on short notice, made themselves available, met with these guys. And, we just are extremely excited to keep the conversation going with them. And I think when you talk to Isaiah, you're going to see why. So, Isaiah, buddy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you carry the conversation whatever direction you want. But thank you for joining us this morning. Everybody remember, it's where he is. It's actually 3 hours behind, so it's early in the morning for him.
Isaiah, good morning. Thank you for waking up to do this one today.
Yeah. Good morning, of course. Yeah, JB, thanks so much for the intro. Although I have to say no thanks as well for stealing the Greta Van Fleet comment there. I also noticed that as we were starting out, and I was going to say, oh man, I can't believe I'm listening to Greta Van Fleet as we start this program. That's amazing.
Sweet, yes.
Yeah, what a fantastic band. It sounds like Led Zeppelin, but completely brand new. I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan too.
Oh, sweet.
But yeah, thanks so much, JB. It was amazing to come and visit West Virginia. It's my first time, and I was completely blown away by the people we met there, and especially, obviously, the beautiful Capitol building. I think if you're born and raised in West Virginia, I'm sure you just think that your Capitol building is a normal Capitol building. It's not. It's absolutely gorgeous. I've been to many Capitol buildings around the country, and that was my favorite by far.
Great.
It's a beautiful building.
Isaiah, tell us about your technology and how it works and what you do, how you came upon
Absolutely. So we make nuclear reactors. So the basic concept here is that we split atoms, and when you split atoms, it gets really hot. And you can use that heat for a number of things. You can make electricity with it. That's one really useful thing to do. We do something a little bit different. We can make electricity, but the most important thing we do is we actually make hydrogen from water. So we buy water, we split that water into hydrogen and oxygen using our nuclear reactor, and then we take that hydrogen and we bond it with CO2. And when you bond hydrogen with CO2, you actually get a synthetic fuel. So you can get basically any hydrocarbon fuel out of that reaction, diesel, jet fuel, gasoline, even methane. And what that means is that we can make these very valuable hydrocarbon fuels out of very cheap materials. Water and CO2, being very cheap. As long as our nuclear reactors are, safe and effective, and and we can build a lot of them, which we think we can. What that means is we can produce very, very cheap fuels. Now, we were really excited about the conversation in West Virginia because, what this means is that we really need CO2. CO2 is a feedstock for us. This is how we make our fuel. and we really need it in large quantities. So West Virginia obviously produces a lot of CO2. We're big fans of the state. We're big fans of coal. We think that coal is this incredible energy source that we should not abandon so quickly. And one of the byproducts of coal plants obviously is a lot of CO2, and we actually want to buy that. So we have a vision for West Virginia, which is to actually buy all of the CO2 from the coal plants in West Virginia. And this would make all of the coal plants carbon neutral, which is fantastic. So, kind of eliminates the part of coal that's, that people are trying to reduce right now, which is CO2 emissions. So we'll basically take that down to zero while still allowing coal plants to operate full scale. And JB talked at the beginning about people kind of realizing that nuclear seems to be happening, seems to be coming back, and I'm excited about that personally. But one of the things that we've noticed is that nuclear people seem to go to coal-heavy states and say, "Hey, we can replace your coal plants with nuclear reactors." That's not what we want to do. We want to do the opposite of that. We want the coal industry to continue, and we want to see, coal lever up as high as possible, and we'll just buy that CO2 and we'll, eliminate the bad part of it.
Isaiah, how do you capture the CO2 to use it for your project?
So the CO2 will come out of a flue gas stream. So the, coal plant, it can be natural gas as well, I should say. Natural gas plants, coal plants both have, CO2 heavy flue gas streams. About 5% of flue gas coming off of a nat gas smokestack. It's about 15% of a coal plant smokestack. So we'll basically just run that flue gas through a couple separation units. It's a pretty simple process. There's a few different methods for it. Generally amine-based liquid solutions where the CO2 gets chemically captured and then you recycle that and just get gaseous CO2 out. So that's a pretty simple process. Well known today. There are a few places in West Virginia where it's currently being captured to do things like bury it underground. We don't believe in that. We think burying CO2 underground is not a good idea. It's going to come back up anyway. And in the meantime, we would really like to actually use that CO2 for something useful.
My co-host, Bill Stubblefield, a retired admiral and a geologist by trade.
Yeah.
Bill?
Good morning, Isaiah. Fascinating discussion, and I can see a lot of possibilities. So going back to first principle, I understand that you're using water and CO2 as the two starting sources. Is that correct?
That's right. Those are our feedstocks.
Okay, so ample water and the CO2, and then from there you go through your process. Looking at your web page, you use a term TRISO as your fuel. What does that mean?
Yes, so TRISO is our nuclear fuel. So when you run a nuclear reactor, you need to constantly be feeding it uranium, and the uranium will split apart, and that's the fundamental power source. There's a few different ways to encapsulate uranium. We use a really interesting method that was invented in the U.S. in the 80s and 90s. It's called TRISO, which, if you're curious, stands for tristructural isotropic fuel. Basically what it means is that it's extremely small kernels of uranium wrapped in a few different hard layers of carbon and silicon. And what that means is that it's extremely, extremely safe. So if you have a spent nuclear fuel, nuclear waste, one of the big questions is what do you do with the nuclear waste after it's been run through the reactor? And you want it to be very well contained. And it turns out that making the fuel format, these very small kernels that are wrapped in layers of carbon and layers of silicon, is this incredible way to encapsulate fuel. So when it becomes nuclear waste, it's already encapsulated. It's sort of like, you might have seen these pictures of nuclear reactors where you're encapsulating these spent waste in these large concrete casks. That's essentially what we're doing, but on a very, very small scale. So the fuel starts encapsulated and it stays encapsulated. And these are really, really tough kernels, and so nothing really leaks out. You don't get radioactive material leaking out of them. So it's a fantastic way to contain the uranium, to contain the waste afterward. That's just extremely safe to handle.
Yeah, because that was a real stumbling block a few years or so ago as they were trying to get the waste to Nevada for permanent storage, which never happened. It was the fear of the individual states of transporting the waste product across their state lines. Are you saying that the spent fuel will be the source of your nuclear fuel or not? Or do you have to come up with a pure form of uranium?
No, so we won't use spent fuel yet. I think at some point in the future, a lot of reactors will use spent fuel, and we'll talk about that in a second. One note on the Yucca Mountain thing. You're right. We tried to come up with a long-term storage depot situation in Nevada and Yucca Mountain, and that plan, eventually failed. What's interesting, though, is that we were worried about what we were going to do with nuclear waste, and we were trying to come up with the solution. The solution didn't work. And in the meantime, what we did, the actual solution was just to do nothing. We actually just continue stacking the spent fuel next to the reactors. Most spent fuel is just stacked on the site where it was burned. And what's interesting about that is that's worked out just fine. It turns out that nuclear waste is so small, and it's actually so easy to contain in these large concrete casks that it ended up just not being a problem at all. So this huge problem that we spent years trying to figure out where to put it long term, it's actually just been fine to stack it next to the reactor, and they're perfectly safe there.
That's interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go. So I was just going to say, the second thing that's interesting, I don't even think of nuclear waste as waste, because as you pointed out, there's lots of ways you can actually reuse what we call nuclear waste as fuel again. So nuclear waste is really just future fuel. There's a type of reactor called a fast reactor that can essentially use what we would think of as waste as brand new fuel. And we don't really use those reactors yet because they're a little bit advanced and we're still developing the technology. Technology takes time to develop. But when we think of storing nuclear waste for hundreds of years, I look at that and I say, no, that's not going to be sitting there for hundreds of years. It's going to be sitting there for about 30 years until advanced reactors come online and fast reactors, and then suddenly that's going to become a valuable commodity that actually gets used as fuel.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I was very familiar with the Sandia effort years ago to bury it in the deep trenches of the ocean. That did not materialize. Yucca Mountain was because of politics that did not materialize. But your point that let it sit and then the fast reactors will come about and their own process will take care of the problem. That's a fascinating thought.
That's right. And, I was in Dallas a few days ago and talking to some nuclear regulators and investors, and I have this little cube that I like to carry around. It easily fits in your hand. It's about the size of a soda can, and I like to show it to people because what that is it represents the amount of nuclear waste that you as a person would create for your entire lifetime's worth of energy. Meaning if every single thing that you did in your life was from nuclear in terms of energy use, every light you turned on, every car you drove, every time you got on an airplane, every time you rode a train, if all of that was from nuclear, the entire waste footprint of your life would be about the size of a soda can.
That's striking.
So we're really just... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Let me shift gears a little bit. And the reuse of nuclear, I think, is a breakthrough in its own right. But looking at your webpage again, you say you intend to build thousands of reactors on one large site and vertically integrating from design to operation. Why hundreds and thousands of small nuclear sites, reactors rather, than one large nuclear reactor?
That's a really great question. It's a question that people have been asking for a long time. The basic answer is that it's easier to build lots of small things than one big thing because it's just easier to manufacture. So if you think about what it takes to build a very large object, you essentially just need extremely precise construction. You need to be running tolerances across, very, very large distances, and you have to get everything right the first time. And there's no repeatability, right? If you learn how to make, this very large wall, that's the only time you're going to make that wall. You're not going to make that wall 10 more times, and you don't get to learn in between each one. But if you end up with the same amount of power and you made 1,000 units, you get to learn on each one. So you make a small one, and you figure out, okay, that didn't work so well. We can make that better. And then you make another one, and you learn something more, and you say, well, okay, well, that, piece could actually be a lot more efficient there. We didn't need to use, all of this metal. We could have made that smaller. We should have made this one bigger. And then each one you learn a little bit. And you also get to control quality much better in a factory where you're just building many of these things. You're running quality on all of them and you're comparing them with each other. So this is just something that we've noticed over time in industries that it's surprising, but it's much easier to make many small things than to make one very large thing.
So that implies that they were not the small reactors, numerous small reactors, would not be built at one time. It would be a temporal construction project.
Yeah, and I would think of it, more like a manufacturing project than a construction project. Really, there's a little bit of construction on these sites. We call these gigasites, by the way. So gigasites, we would call it Gigasite West Virginia. And, these are very large acreage sites where we have a co-location of a factory, a reactor factory, and then a deployment site. So we basically build the reactors, and then we kind of ship them 100 feet across the fence and plug them in. And that's right. We would do it in a continuous fashion. So we'd try to turn on a couple a week, that sort of thing. And over time, it would grow to hundreds and then even thousands of reactors on that site. And the total power rating for a while would be less than, one of your largest 2-gigawatt coal plants. But over time, it would grow to be much larger. And, that just allows us to, like I said, we get to reuse the tools. We get to have the same crews doing it over and over and learning on each one.
For your source of water, does this imply you'd have to be located close to a river?
No, we don't need to be close to a river, unlike existing nuclear reactors, which need water cooling. We actually don't need water cooling. We basically use all of the thermal energy to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, we do need water to actually, as a feedstock for the fuel, but that's a smaller volume of water. And, our price is pretty good on that. We can afford to spend a lot on that water, which means we can afford to transport it. So we've been talking to, some of the state resource folks that you got in Charleston who are, looking at the water deposits around the state. And we found a lot of good sources that, will work well for us.
About 2 minutes left. Matt Miller.
Yeah, Delegate Akers, I want to come back to you because you mentioned earlier that we would talk a little bit about regulatory hoops. I mean, this all sounds so good, but what are some of those challenges that you face in trying to get this off the ground in West Virginia?
Well, I can say the challenges mostly come from the federal side, and one of the good things we have right now is Senator Capito was one of the leaders in D.C. on nuclear. I think future Senator Justice will also be helpful on this, and I feel the same way about incoming Governor Morrissey. But Senator Capito was one of the lead sponsors of what's called the ADVANCE Act, which is meant to help start streamlining the federal regulatory process. Here in West Virginia, I think Isaiah will agree, we had the meetings last week, and on the state side, everybody in the room was looking for ways to say yes. And it wasn't like that, 10 years ago in West Virginia, fellows. I mean, the regulatory environment here has just gotten much better in terms of looking to be a positive partner with whoever wants to move into our state. So on the regulatory side of the state, we're full steam ahead. I think on the federal side, we've obviously got to, help get some issues fixed. But, one of the things Isaiah didn't mention, we're short on time, but, when we have a bunch of these reactors in one place, what that also allows you to do, aside from creating large volumes of liquid fuel, it would also allow you to co-locate other industrial sites there as well. So we could, with such a high volume of energy at a low price, you could start producing metals, again, stateside. Right now we're offshore to China. So there's just a lot of potential here to bring a lot of industry to West Virginia. This isn't just about nuclear. It's about preserving our hydrocarbon industries with making them carbon neutral and co-locating other industries here as well.
JB, on that note, I got to cut you off. I'm out of time. I want to thank you very much for bringing this to the table. And Isaiah, great to meet you today. Thank you.
Great to meet you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, folks.
You guys have a great day and a Merry Christmas, too. We're back with more after these.